On this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy, I talk with Bobby Lehew of commonsku, and he turns the tables and asks questions to me. What's up? Well, hey there, and welcome to another edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hasseman, but it's a little bit different this week. I have a very special guest, Bobby Lehew from commonsku. And Bobby has, as Bobby is wont to do sometimes, he likes to flip things around a little bit. And so he's asked if he could interview me this time. It's going to be a little different, and it's going to be fun. And so, Bobby, I give you the microphone.
All right, Kirby. Thanks for having me on, by the way. And I'm so glad to flip this on you for once, because you've done a lot of these programs and it's great to ask you the questions. And as a content guy, I actually love this part of the job, right? Just like you do. I love this part of the job. Yeah. So what have you learned since you started this? You know, there's in one of my classes I show Gary Vaynerchuk's first episode. And I show his 1,000th episode, and I show the distinction between the two, and so many lessons learned between the 1 and 1,000. You actually see it in the program. What have you learned? What critical tips do you have for folks that are building content? You've done this a lot now.
Yeah, no. You know, I've learned a ton, as you might expect. But, you know, I think when it comes to tips for other content creators, kind of, you know, one of the things that I actually heard it from Gary Vaynerchuk on his Ask Gary V show, right? One of his early episodes, he actually said that the average web show never makes it to 5 episodes. And so my big thing from the very beginning was I didn't release one until I could release 5, because screw that, I'm gonna break that. And that was really good for me because it allowed me to get some positive feedback and still have things in the can so that I wasn't scrambling to do the next. So that was good. I think tips for content creators that I have is, number one is really consistency. I think, you know, part of the thing that has helped me is that every week there's a new Delivering Marketing Joy. Some of them are great. Some of them aren't as good because of me, not the guest. But because I've been consistent, I think that's built up my brand and given me credibility even when I'm asking for guests. So consistency is number one. I think make it consumable in some way, right? You know, these shows aren't 2 hours long, right? Hopefully they're in a way that, you know, the audience can consume them. And then really, you know, the thing that I think is probably the unspoken thing a lot of time is you have to have courage. You have to have the courage to put yourself out there, because I always say everybody's got that voice that says, who the hell do you think you are? And, you know, I've got that voice. Everybody's got it. And so I think you have to have courage to just do it. Take the action and do it.
That's one of the biggest things, don't you think? I mean, it's really tough to be vulnerable like this all the time. It's a very vulnerable position to put yourself in, right?
It is. I mean, at the end of the day, the show could be terrible. And it's funny because this past week I was talking to somebody, and they were saying, well, what happens when you put out one that isn't as good? Do you ever go back and take it down or anything? And I'm always like, no, because you have to put out the bad ones in order to get to the good ones. And so that you just got to do.
How has doing this changed you?
You know, I think, you know, from a brand perspective, I think it's made me a little bit better known, specifically in the industry. And it started out as a content piece that I love because I got to share platform. But what it's become a personal development class for me, because I really am talking to really smart people, both in and outside of our industry, that they make me better. And so probably that from a personal perspective.
And business? How's it impacted your business?
You know, I think, you know, obviously it's helped, you know, as I do more speaking and more brand building and books and stuff. That's been good. But honestly, I think the big thing about content creation for me, that it's so much in our industry, we get put at the last part of the conversation. So in other words, all the themes, the marketing plans, all that stuff's been brought up and figured out. And then, by the way, we've got $500 to spend on some stuff. What it's really helped is it has slated me more as a marketer. So I get to be a part of the conversation on the front end. And not only is that good for business, but it's good for my clients, because I'm able to ask questions early on that help them shape their message into a better way.
Yeah, that's great. So what's the hard? You have the video series, obviously. You have podcasts. You write. What's the hardest part about content creation?
I really enjoy it. So let me just say that this is if this is the sales piece of it. I've always been a sales guy, but I really enjoy content creation. So it's all really good. I think the hardest part, honestly, is lining up guests. When you're doing it
Yeah.
every week, it doesn't matter what I want to do. If the show is built on having great guests, then I have to have a guest. It's actually so the DMJ podcast that I've been doing on Mondays. One of the things I like about it is whenever am inspired, whenever I have some I want to sit down and do it, I just do it. So I can get
Right.
several in the can if I want to at one time. Whereas with this, it's a little harder when I have a guest. It's totally worth it because I think it really adds a lot. But that's probably the hardest thing is just lining up guests consistently.
Has there been a time in the video series in particular where you went, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. Seth Godin talks about it in the dip, right? Where everybody, whenever you
Hmm.
start anything, you're going like this, and then after a while, it goes like this. So there's a really cool story, and Mark would know this. I was probably 20, 25 episodes in, and at that point, you're like, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
Mark set up an interview. We got the podcast interview with Seth Godin. And right before we did it live, which was really cool, and right before the episode went, Mark was kind of introducing me to Seth, and Seth's like, "Oh yeah, I've seen your web show, Delivering Marketing Joy," and I'm like, "Holy shit, really?"
Right.
And so he says, "Yeah," he said, "I watched the episode with Ted Rubin," and he was really specific, so it wasn't like he was blowing sunshine. He
Yeah.
actually at least had seen that one.
Right.
And right then he says, "Hey, keep that up. In 3 years, you'll be glad you did."
Mm.
And at that moment, I did not have the next week's show. And,
Wow.
and so I was inspired to keep it going. And then actually months and months later, I emailed Seth and thanked him. And then that was sort of the impetus for him coming on and
Yeah.
being on the 100th episode. So he was super gracious to do that. So yes, there was definitely a point
That's
in time
fantastic.
when I wanted to stop. But it's nice what one person with some kind words will do.
Absolutely. So the brewery, what's that about? This is fantastic. This is like a total left turn, and everybody went, "Whoa, what's Kirby doing?"
Yeah, I get that.
I will say, from a branding perspective, it's not a shock, right?
Yeah.
It's just a fun place to be. But tell us about that. What's that about?
Yeah,
How
so
did how did you say? Yeah, how did that passion start?
yeah, no, it's funny. So like a lot of people, I brewed a little bit in my home, and how you have something in your mind that just kind of someday I'd like to do that. Someday I'd like to do that. And I mean, I am, just like I said in the first, I'm a person of action. I believe that ideas generally are not that valuable. I think execution is where the value is. And so I was being hypocritical to who I was, right? Is that I kept thinking about it and saying it's an idea and someday I might do it. And then one day I was listening to a book by Richard Branson, The Virgin Way. And at the end of the book, he's talking about, look, if you've had this idea, just do it. Like, stop thinking about it, just do it. And I literally was like 3 blocks from my house. And I drove home, pulled in the driveway, went in and said, Amy, my wife, I'm like, I want to do this microbrew. I'm going to do this. And she's like, oh, great. But yeah, it's one of those things I've wanted to do for a long time. And it is definitely hard because we're still doing Hasseman marketing and that's going great. And so I'm
Right.
trying to balance all that, and we're in the beginning stages. So it's fun and it's exciting.
So you have some partners involved in this. What is the challenge? I'm just curious to peek into the glimpse of what this business is like. What's the challenge today? What did you walk in going, oh, with the brewery, I got to get this done this week?
Oh yeah. So it's what's interesting about it. You'll appreciate this, Bobby. Is we've applied for license and it's been about 4 months since we've applied, and they say about 3 to 6 is when you start to get something from the government. And so I'm starting to look at that calendar and going, okay, it's going to be go time soon. And so right now we're looking at tap room that we have to put together. I've spent the last 6 months working on recipes, so we're getting closer on that. I feel pretty good about that, which is the most fun part, is you get to try beer.
Yeah, right.
But right, I mean, literally today, I was looking at the construction of our bar. We got a kegerator, commercial kegerator delivered last night. We got, like I met with flooring people to clean up stuff. It's as you have ever launched any business, there's a ton of moving parts, and so it's lots on our mind. But really, it's really cool. And the big thing with this is and actually one of my partners said this to me today. And I need to remind myself, it's like, I can only do one thing at a time, right? I can only take care of the next thing, not 10 things. And so that's the biggest challenge for me right now.
So what does that brewery look like for you in the next 5 to 10 years? What's your grand vision for that?
Our tagline is going to be joyfully irreverent, which is consistent, right? But right now, everything we're doing, and we're in a small town, and we've kind of said, look, we want to be the little brewery that could. We are doing everything we can to start as small as possible to get to revenue, right? And so it's been interesting. People have kind of dug that concept. Like, I think that it's like a little bit, people like the underdog a little bit. And so honestly, what we've kind of kicked around here recently is obviously we'd like to grow it to a point where we can grow production. But my latest sort of vision for this is that I see tap rooms in other small areas, because Coshocton's a really small town, great town, but there's not like a ton of other microbrews around. And so I kind of like the idea of having tap rooms in other small, underserved areas where we can celebrate the heritage, because that's what we're going to do with our breweries. We're going to talk about Coshocton County heritage a lot. And I think that you tap into a population of people who like craft beer, but also who are really proud of their community. And so 5 years from now, I'd like to see us starting to kind of discover that.
That's cool. Anything on the brewery else you want to comment on the brewery in particular?
On the brewery in particular, the thing I'd say about that is it has been a really cool adventure. That is, it's been several years since I've started a business, and so this is such a big capital intensive business that the idea of jumping in and doing it has been really scary and really exciting. But it's also really cool to see how people have responded. People are pumped about it, and that's rewarding.
That's awesome. Thanks for letting me interview you on your own show, Kirby. This has been a treat. This has been a great treat.
It's been super fun, Bobby. I really appreciate you doing it and taking the time to do it. And we'll do it again, and next time I get to ask you questions, okay?
Okay. Cool. That sounds great, man.
All right. Well, that wraps up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching, but wait! Can you do me a favor? Please subscribe to my channel. If you haven't done it already, the way to do it's right over here. And hey, if you want to watch the last episode, check that out over here. Again, before you leave, subscribe!